Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Gary Cohen. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Adi. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
You are very welcome. So I want to give a big shout out to Sebastian from Rila that I had on my podcast a few weeks ago. And we had a great podcast about sales systems and how you can monitor it. And if you're not familiar with Rila, you should definitely check it out and listen to my episode with Sebastian. He told me, you got to talk to Gary. Gary is all about systems. And we're going to talk about that today, about systems and processes and procedures, especially in the home improvement industry. But, you know, it also applies to any industry. And we're going to talk about the importance of having processes. So first of all, thank you, Sebastian, for the introduction. And Gary, you are the vice president. You are a vice president in CCN, right? So
That's correct.
deal with so why don't you tell us a little bit about CCN and how it got started and what it is all about?
Sure. So CCN was founded back in 1996 by a gentleman named Richard Kaler. Richard Kaler was a roofing contractor in the Philadelphia market, and he recognized the need for teaching contractors best practices, putting systems and processes in place in their business so they could thrive, using the word you used in the intro, and thrive is a great word. Okay, what we're looking to do is help contractors scale their revenues and their profits by putting these best practices in place. So he founded the company, he started growing the company, and very early on in those late 90s, there was a roofing company in Washington, D.C. called Maggio Roofing. And that was owned by a gentleman, and still is owned by a gentleman named Scott Siegel. Well, Scott became one of the very first members of Certified Contractors Network, our company, which we go by the CCN acronym. And Scott became a very active member, and it transformed his company. So going through the CCN membership and getting all these systems and processes in place just was a game changer for Scott. And he became a huge advocate for CCN and actually joined the CCN steering committee for Richard Kaler. And then unfortunately, Richard Kaler passed away suddenly in 2006. And his partner, his life partner, ended up being the person who had to step in and try to keep this business going. And she really turned to Scott because he was so active with Richard as a member. And to make a very long story short, in 2009, Scott acquired the company from Richard's partner. And Scott has owned the company since 2009 and continuing to build the company and continuing with its evolution. And fast forward the clock, back in the fall of 2021, like right after the big COVID hit, I joined the company because they were looking for somebody who had learning and development experience, which I did have that background, have a lot of marketing in my background as well. And they asked me to come in and help and ultimately run the day-to-day operations. And that's what I do. So I work very closely with Scott, and we drive the business, basically.
Great. So Gary, let's talk about processes for contractors, right? I mean, not just contractors, it's any industry, because you and I were talking a bit about before the podcast, you know, and you specialize with contractors and home improvement. We work with a lot of contractors and a lot of trades. And we also we also work with professional services, manufacturing. And what I found, you know, is that people like let's say a dentist, they go to become they go to dental school, they want to help people, or they're interested in the profession. They're good at what they do in terms of their profession, right? But then they decide, well, I want to have the freedom as an entrepreneur and open my own practice, right? Or a contractor decides, okay, I'm going to open my own business and I want to be independent and just work for myself and gain all this freedom and ability to create and be in charge of my own destiny. But what you get instead is all this chaos and confusion. And, the day-to-day doesn't seem like this amazing fairy tale dream that you tell yourself when you open a business, right? I'm going to be a business owner. I'm going to have all of that. So that is really like, I like your approach in terms of like, okay, you're really good at what you're doing in terms of the trades, but now you have to learn how to run a business, right? I mean, do you encounter that a lot with a lot of contractors?
Oh my gosh, it's so commonplace, Adi. And I want to take you back to what really is happening here with these. And let's talk specifically about contractors because that's who we're serving and what they're going through. So again, when they decide to start their own business or purchase a business or take over for a generation before them, they have not necessarily gone to school and gotten a business degree or gotten an MBA. Okay, they're tradespeople, and they're great tradespeople, most of them. But the problem is making that transition from being a great tradesperson to being a skilled entrepreneur is a big hurdle. It's a very big hurdle. And for all your listeners, let me tell you why it's a very big hurdle.
Yeah.
Okay. So I spent 11 years in academia. So I spent 30 years in corporate, 11 years in academia, retired, and then came back out of retirement to be at CCN. So let me tell you what the issue is. There are 4 stages of learning. And the first stage of learning is unconscious incompetence. So the definition of unconscious incompetence is a person doesn't know what they don't know. And that's exactly what happens when a brand new entrepreneur starts a business if they haven't had the training in running a business. They don't even know what they're not aware of. Okay, so, at least if you get to that second stage where you're consciously incompetent, then at least you know what you don't know and you can start to learn what you don't know. But it's like a deer in the headlights, Adi. So what we do is we kind of hold their hands and sit down and say, look, the way you're going to be successful in this business is to have documented systems and processes in every functional area of your home improvement or remodeling company. Now, the first thing everybody thinks about is sales. And Adi, I had a mentor very early in my career who said to me, Gary, nothing happens in a business until you sell something. Okay. And, there's a lot of truth to that line. I mean, if you don't sell anything.
You got to sell, that's for sure. I mean, if you have a business and
sure.
nobody sells anything, it's a problem.
That's a problem. So everybody, that's where it seems to start. So it would be logical then that probably I would say our core training, our most popular one, although we have a lot of trainings in our curriculum, is sales. So let me give you an example of that.
Well, let's talk about general. Like, okay, so you feel like in an organization, when we have a company, you're right. I mean, my approach is always to find out what area is the biggest pain point, right? Because you want to get the immediate return on investment. And a lot of times it is sales, right? Because for various reasons. So let's talk about, I just really want to give our listeners the idea or inspire them, encourage them that process documentation is important, because both you and I do that. And we are obviously convinced that this is important. So I want to hear from your experience in terms of results. What is it that you see when processes are being documented? What transformation do you see in a business?
Well, I would say that there are 2 major transformations that happen when you go down that path. Okay, the first one is, and in no particular order, when you document processes that are then followed, you're going to be operating with much greater efficiency. And when you operate your company with much greater efficiency, you're going to drive greater net profits. Okay, because inefficiency creates waste. So that's number one. Okay, because frankly, so many contractors come to us and they're struggling because there is no system or process. They're just winging it every day. Okay, and I'm not, it's a problem, and they know they have a problem, but they don't know how to fix it. So that's the first thing, efficiency. The second thing is it will definitely help you scale revenues and profits. In addition, just because all the areas of your company that you're operating in, you can raise the bar on what you are reaching goal-wise with each area of your company when you have set processes and procedures and documented. It's not just the processes and procedures, but you have to also have documented goals for your company in every department in your company.
Absolutely.
And those processes and procedures, if followed properly and executed properly, assuming you have the talent on your team to do so, should result in the kind of profitable growth we're talking about here.
Right. So you're saying efficiency, absolutely increased efficiency. Is this increased efficiency in the day-to-day operations? It also helps with onboarding and training, right? In terms of like when you bring new employees. Right. I also find it, and let me know if you do too, I'm sure you do, in terms of risk mitigation, in terms of customer satisfaction, right? Because if you have the same processes followed every single time, you can control the results. I mean, of course, it goes back to efficiency. So things are being more efficient because if somebody messes up because there was no follow-up on the process, then it decreases the efficiency because now you have to go fix it instead of working on the next thing you should be working on, right?
Right. And you're absolutely right. So may I give an example of what you just said?
Of course, I would love to.
This is not in sales. This is in production. Okay, so if you think about it, what is the goal that you have? Obviously, your goal is to have a successful, profitable company. But in order to do that, the ultimate goal is to deliver a world-class customer experience. And if we can consistently deliver a world-class customer experience, we're going to get referrals, we're going to get repeat business, we're going to get lots of 5-star reviews, and things start happening at that point. So let's look at that, for example, because I think you made a great point. Let's talk about production. Okay, there needs to be consistency. This is what you were talking about. So when we started production, we've got to talk about things like pre-construction meetings. So that's one of the systems and processes that have to be in place because you need to manage customer expectations. You need to make sure you're on the same page before you start the job. Okay, so that pre-construction meeting, that's what we train in our production mastery, that we teach all about everything you should be doing in a pre-construction meeting. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, now let's go a step further. Another thing to consider when it comes to a world-class customer experience on the production side is scheduling. Scheduling each job, making sure that you're able to start a job in a timely fashion and meet the expectations of that customer. Okay, and there have to be the right systems and processes in place. The other thing is firewalls. You always want to build firewalls in your business, okay, so that you can anticipate potential problems and nip it in the bud before it becomes a problem.
What would be an example of a firewall? Give us an example of a firewall in a remodeling company.
Okay, so there could be a lot of different ones, but one example could be, making sure when you're doing it, a lot of times until you start a job, you might uncover things that weren't in your original estimate, in your proposal, right? Because you uncovered things that weren't visible or weren't seen. You've got to be prepared for that. Okay, so you've got to make sure you have all that preparation in place before you start a job to make sure that you are covering everything and minimizing these issues. Now, no matter how much you build firewalls, no matter how much you do all those things right, there's going to be times when there's a customer who maybe isn't feeling satisfied or comfortable during the process. Okay. And that creates, for lack of a better word, conflict between the contractor and the customer. So that's why it's important to have systems and processes in place for conflict resolution. So in other words, you have to anticipate every eventuality that you can so that you can nip it in the bud in advance.
Right. I agree. And that's part of the risk mitigation, really, why having.
Right. And so that risk mitigation that you mentioned, the risk mitigation, that's why something like, for example, conflict resolution, we teach a 10-step process for conflict resolution. So when you start to go into every functional area of a business, and I just use production as one example, there's a deep dive that has to happen into everything that's going to be taking place in that functional area so that you can mitigate those risks, so that you can achieve those efficiencies, so that you can create a happy customer.
Absolutely. Do you feel like well-documented processes and procedures, in your opinion and from your experience, do they help when a business is getting sold, when the owner wants to sell the business?
Oh, I think most definitely. I mean, when you're selling a company, and let's take the roofing industry, for example. The roofing industry right now is a very popular industry for private equity acquisition. Okay, well, these private equity groups really want to see a really well buttoned up company, because when they're making an investment in acquiring a contracting company, okay, they're looking to get an ROI, a strong ROI. Well, they're smart enough to know that the way you're going to get a strong ROI is for a company to have proven systems and processes in place in every area of the company, as opposed to operating a company, I'll use the phrase catch as catch can, where it's just every day you're just doing whatever you're doing and you're not following a process. So yeah, the answer is yes to your question. This is critically important, particularly then.
Absolutely. What do you think about employee retention? Do you think employees will tend to stay in companies where there are well-documented systems and processes?
I do. And that's because you will have less controversy amongst your team if everything is set and documented and they can follow that process. It's when you don't have a process that you have a lot of confusion in a company, that creates a lot of inner conflict in a company, and people get frustrated. And then, of course, good people leave. And so I think you're dead on that one. I think 100%, this really helps with retention.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
Adi, it helps in every facet of your company.
It does. It does. And it all leads towards profitability and scalability, like you said. Absolutely. Okay, so you said it several times. This is what we preach to our clients. I always tell my clients, I do not want to to just document the processes for you. We gotta also make sure they're being followed by all. Otherwise, there is no point. We're not here to write beautiful manuals, right? We're here to implement. And you said it's many times, and you do the same in terms of making sure the processes are being followed. What are the best advice that you can give to our listeners? And again, remember, you deal with contractors. Our listeners are entrepreneurs from all different industries. But what I find is that even if you're in one industry and you have successful actions and best practices, it applies to all of them, right? So what do you find are the best practices to make sure that the processes are being followed by all?
Well, I think first of all, it all starts at the top. So the owner of that entrepreneurial firm has to buy into the systems and processes. They have to be the cheerleader for it. Everything starts at the top, and I know you would agree with that.
100%. That's the first thing.
Without even asking you, I know you would agree with that.
I agree 100%, Gary. Yes, I amen to that. Okay.
Yeah. So then, okay, we have to have accountability. So that entrepreneur owner needs to make sure they're setting up the right accountability systems in their company, okay, to ensure that those processes are being followed. And one way that you can measure that is by, managing your business by the numbers with metrics, okay, in every area of your business. Because when you look at metrics every week, no, I didn't say every month, I said every week. If you look at metrics, you will see signs of somebody's not following something, okay, when your numbers slip in a particular area. That means something is going awry, okay? And the key is, look, no company is perfect. And even when a company embraces systems and processes, somebody's going to drop the ball somewhere. We all know that. It happens, okay? So the key is to be able to catch this very early on and fix it and plug up that gap, okay? Because otherwise, what happens is it becomes the new normal. And before you know it, you've lost all of that energy towards putting those systems and processes in place. So again, it's a matter of holding your team accountable. It's your way of policing what's going on out there, okay, so that we continue to stay on top of everything we're doing and following it to a T, okay? There's got to be accountability. And if there's not sufficient accountability in the company, you'll probably never get there.
Right, absolutely. And there is obviously the other steps of rolling it out, making sure that everybody learns it, etc. Now, Gary, let me ask you another question. And I hear it a lot, I'm sure you hear it as well. What if processes change, right? I mean, like if there is a new system that is being implemented, a new AI tool, a new CRM, basically a new product, you documented all your processes and procedures, but now maybe we need to change something. Maybe we need to tweak something. Maybe the numbers, as you said, yeah, looking at the numbers every week, I agree with you, couldn't agree more, even daily. You look at your numbers, you evaluate, and you go, you know what, my sales process that used to work for some reason is not working. I have to tweak something. What is your advice in terms of tweaking and changing processes?
Well, and I guess my first comment, Adi, is simply this. Business is not static. Okay, right. Business is dynamic. Your business is dynamic, your competitor's business is dynamic, and the environment in which we operate our businesses is dynamic. So what does that mean? It means there's going to be change. Okay, so systems and processes are not a one and done. They must be kept up to date. Because to your point, and our good friends at Rilla are a great example. They came out with an amazing tool using artificial intelligence. Well, now you need to take advantage of that because it raises the bar on sales performance, and you need to now make that part of your systems and processes in sales and sales management. Okay, so you never want to say, okay, I created all my systems and processes, I put it to bed, and now I can just sit back. No. Okay, everything is evolving. Everything is constantly changing. And the minute a company decides to embrace a static approach to their business is the day they start dying.
I agree, totally. So what would you say to somebody, let's say I would come to you and say, Gary, I don't want to really document my process. I want to change it first to make it optimum before I actually document it. So I'm going to wait until I actually have an optimum process to document it. What would you say to that?
Then you'll never document it because there's always change.
Right.
So you've got to document your process. And then as new opportunities arise, new technologies come into play, then you update it. But you must create it first. Because if you keep waiting for that next great thing, that'll never stop. You'll never create the processes. So number one, get systems and processes in place. I'd rather have imperfect systems and processes than no systems and processes.
I agree. And what I say also to my clients when they bring it up, or to people that bring it up, entrepreneurs that bring it up, is like, you have to start somewhere, because if you don't do it, how would you know what you're changing? It's really dangerous, actually, because it's kind of like, let's say I'm not going to write a map of where I'm at because I don't know where I'm going. So I'm just, when I get there, I'm going to draw the map, right? Or something, some analogy of that sort. Well, how are you going to know if you're going to get there if you don't know where you're at right now? How are you ever going to get there, right?
That's
And
right.
it can be dangerous because you can actually change things that are working really well right now. But because you didn't document it, and because then you didn't measure it, you just don't know. And that is what I see as a problem, because you never know what you are improving, because you then just change things that shouldn't be changed. And I think, and that's basically the basic of change management, is that it has to be controlled, and you only change what needs to change, and you keep the same what needs to stay the same.
You're singing my tune here.
I know we both are. So this is like a great conversation. So
it is. I mean, it's,
yeah.
and I loved your analogy because it's kind of funny. We have a lot in common. I use this analogy all the time. I always say in trainings, you're about to take a road trip, and let's say you live in New York and you want to go to Seattle. If you had no maps, which I know I'm dating myself, okay, but that's what I used when I was young, and you have no GPS, you have no navigation of any kind, how are you going to know the most efficient way to go from New York to Seattle?
Well, how do you know that you actually got there?
Exactly. And if you don't know your starting point, how can you assure you'll even get to your destination, right? So your analogy is spot on. And you need to document first, and you never know. You might have processes. You may have I won't even say processes, because if people haven't created processes, then they don't have them. But they may be doing things that are actually good, as you said. But you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, you've got to build the systems and processes first. And it will be an ongoing project of improvement. That's the best way I can explain it to your listeners. Create it, accept the fact it's probably not going to be perfect, initially, because your business is constantly changing. But once you get the core built out, now you can make these improvements to your processes, document those improvements, okay, and just keep doing it. The other thing I think is worthy of mentioning is, once you've done that, I mean, I would like to think that all of your listeners, who are these wonderful entrepreneurs out there, are putting together a comprehensive business plan each year. Okay. But you and I both know so many people don't. Okay. This will help as well. Okay. Because once again, you're documenting. Okay, you're putting together your entire plan, you're putting together your pro formas, you're putting for every department, your spends in every area, the initiatives that you're going to have in place, and you combine that exercise with documented, proven systems and processes, and that's a winning formula.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then make your plan known to your people, to the entire company, so they can help you make it real.
Absolutely. You should really, there should really be transparency with your team on all of this. I
agree. Gary, this has been a tremendous conversation. I knew it would, because we are basically talking about this. We're in total agreement. So hopefully we inspired our listeners here to take the next step in systematizing their business. I really value and appreciate your expertise. Thank you very much for being a guest on this podcast.
Oh, Adi, thank you so much, Adi, for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.